And so there is not a single word that the mind has to share that is true. Not a single word. That the mind and the play of the world has absolutely nothing to do with the truth that you are. That the truth of who you are, the essential nature, is completely independent and free of the mind and the world. We can sometimes jump too soon to this idea that everything is included. Everything is included because there is only one, but it is not included conceptually. Because if we include everything conceptually, we are just allowing the mind to have a hiding place where the mind can say, well, this too is God, this too. From the mental perspective, from a conceptual perspective, from the perspective of God, there's only God. And from this perspective, the one, love, there's only this. And in this, there is an all-inclusivity. But it is different from a conceptual understanding, a mental understanding. We have to come to recognize that nothing that the mind says is true. In order to find the essential nature that is never disturbed, has never been disturbed, that is infinite, eternal wholeness, that in the knowing of this wholeness, the knowing of the being that is the true nature, then we start to recognize that everything is included because the essential nature of everything is the same one. Everything is one in God, in love. And this comes to be known in the direct experience of knowing the essential nature. It is that which already knows. In the knowing, the direct experience of this knowing, it starts to deepen. The knowing of yourself starts to include everything as yourself, right? But there is never anything that the mind can offer or has to say, because the mind's perspective will always be an intellectual one and a conceptualization of a truth, of a reality that cannot be conceptualized without dividing it, right? So what we're speaking of is the stillness, the silence, the deep, unbroken peace that is the essential nature. The awareness that is ever aware, aware of all that is moving and changing. But as we point to the awareness that is aware of the moving, changing, we are pointing in order to recognize that the true essential nature is that you are the awareness of the moving, changing, that you're not the moving, changing. You're not the story of me. You're not the story of my life. And nor are you in true nature ever touched by that story. That story is a projection in consciousness. And the only reason for the projection is to reflect to you your seeming worldview according to the filters that are in place. So the only real use of the appearance of my life is to receive a reflection of where you are protected, where you are hidden, where you are holding a sense of being bound in a me, in a story. And the only reason for it is in order to free yourself from it, to be your true self, to be the wholeness. And the grace is that the reflection offers this possibility to see all of the places that are constrained and restricted. In other words, protected, defended. Because when all protections, all defenses are removed, the raw, the raw being that is left, what is left when all protections and defenses, conditionings and restrictions are removed, is just love, is just the love that you are, is the self that you are, is the glory, the one glory. When all of the senses of limitation and protection are removed, what remains is the essential nature that is shared by seemingly all. But the all is one. The all is not a divided situation. Ever, never, never is it divided. Wholeness is never divided and has never been divided. So there's a simple pointing that we hear again and again, which is to be still and watch, to be still and aware. It is incredibly simple to speak this, but to actually be still and watch is very hard. It is hard because we have learned to identify with the moving, changing. We've learned to identify with the story of me. And in that, we have learned to be a supposed doer who can do something to make the story of me a better story of me. And so it becomes this dance where we're constantly a character that is trying to look for what pleases me, what I enjoy, what works for me, what my preferences are, the way that I like it. But in truth, we have to just watch that, see that, and know that none of that is true. And of course, what seems like the other end of the scale is everything that doesn't please me, everything that bothers me, everything that upsets me, stresses me, brings me pain. And then we're trying to get away from all of these places and to create a situation and a life that I like better. But it is just to be the awareness that sees all of that and realizes that all of that has got nothing to do with true nature. None of it. None of the human experience has anything to do with true nature, not in its conditioned state, not where there is a thought of me and other. And so it is really about illuminating how entangled that story is and how easy it is just to be so lost in it. And if the longing is for freedom, which it is, the longing of every heart is for freedom, is to watch the moving, changing, and as the watcher, the observer, recognize the stillness, the silence, and the naturalness of being that which is watching. Recognize the independence that the watcher has. Recognize this total independence that the awareness has from the play of the world and the surface of life. And feel the freedom in being the awareness, in being the simple awareness. Feel the freedom of being yourself. recognizing the stillness, the silence, and the naturalness of being. So in truth, if all protections fall away, what remains is the one self, is the glory, is love. And that sounds incredibly simple, because it is incredibly simple. And the part that is challenging is to let go of the protections. It is challenging to illuminate the protections, to be willing to be still and face yourself, to face life, because life is yourself. Life is the reflection of everything that has been pushed away and hidden about yourself. And so in order to meet yourself and allow the protections and defenses to drop, there has to be an allowing of life and a meeting of the resistance and stress that arises in the face of life, without moving to protect, without moving to fix, without moving to get away from. As we really come to open to this reality, we recognize that so much spirituality is an escape. And even though well-intended, it is part of the dream. And we have within our dream been pulled towards something that may help us fix, may help us get away from the stress and the suffering. And whilst that has worked and has a certain beauty to it, if we get stuck within the spirituality as a hiding place, then we don't carry it to its fulfillment. We don't carry the possibility that it offers to its fulfillment. That spirituality and practices can offer us a way to come to a deeper stillness, come to the presence of being, but that coming to the presence of being is only the very, very beginning. That it's not the opening to know the true nature. We could even say that the first opening to true nature is just the beginning. Really, the largest part of this unfolding is facing everything that wants to distract and protect, and allow all of these reflections to be received, so that the freedom from these patternings, holding patterns and defenses, protections, can be humbled away, so that the true being that we can glimpse and taste can actually be lived fully, and that we can deepen in this glorious remembrance of who we are. We could say nothing has ever truly happened, but if that is not known in your direct experience, it is a concept that can be very confusing and a little alarming, we could even say. We have to find out in our direct experience, and we have to take the steps within our direct experience to actually find out if everything that we hear in pointings is the truth, is the reality. Don't take anything to be true as a belief, because a belief is just another hiding place, right? We have to test everything. We have to find out within our own functioning that this process, this call to know yourself, it's not a quick fix. It's not a quick fix to get me away from suffering and to make me feel better. Not at all. And many enter into this with an idea that it will fix things, and then I'll be an awakened me and my life will be better. But that is not the truth. That is not reality. Because to come to the remembrance of love, love is what remains when everything has been removed. So to come to the remembrance of love, truly come to the perfect unconditional love that we are. We have to meet and remove all of the layers of protection. We have to come to the courageous willingness to be completely revealed, to be completely transparent, to be the openness that is the open field of reality. To be completely transparent and revealed is to be unprotected, to not be someone that's trying to put on the costume of a character and play out a role to be seen a certain way. And it takes everything that we have within our capacity to move through this process. And the greatest thing that it takes is a longing that is deep enough and full steam ahead enough that we have the resolve, the courage, and the sincerity to actually remain here and to not turn this incredibly profound unfolding into a spiritual adventure, which is all about what the me wants and enjoys, and about gathering experiences like feathers in the cap, because this is not what brings us to freedom. What brings us to freedom is not easy as far as the me and the mind is concerned. And yet it is the most incredibly profound possibility of this human life. It is a natural occurrence that we discover the possibility of this human life and the purpose of this human life. That we come to recognize that this life is for the possibility of a depth of freedom where we drop the body as the glory, right? Where we can drop the body knowing the deathless, eternal one, right? The me doesn't want to imagine that the purpose of a human life is to die well, is to die into God before the body drops, to die into love. It is true that we have to experience a certain death within the lived experience in order to know the true essential nature, to know the love that does not leave. It is not something to be feared in the way the mind could imagine, but there is a dying that happens. There's an ending of a story. There's an ending of the story of me. And the ending of the story of me is not a tragic ending. It's a glorious celebration of the true life living itself, life truly living itself, true vitality, true aliveness, true spontaneity, being this moment and not being hooked and held captive by a past and memory. Because the mind is a mechanism that is essentially the past, and its protection, the ego sense, is a protective mechanism. And the way that it keeps itself protected is by constantly referencing what it knows. And what it knows is the past. What it knows is what it has accumulated in experience and knowledge. And it constantly references its data banks in order to make itself feel safe and give itself a position from which it can feel right. And this is a protective mechanism that has to completely be deconstructed in order for the true essence nature to be lived. Because this structure is a strategic holding, patterning of limitation within consciousness that gives rise to a me that constantly feels to be the doer and then constantly feels to be able to fix my life. So what we are speaking of here is this awareness that is aware of all of that, but is completely free of it. You know, where the aha revelation comes in is to see the mechanism while being aware of the mechanism and to feel the reality of, yes, awareness is completely free of that. And awareness is part of what I am. Somehow I am this awareness that is aware of all of that. And as this awareness, this witnessing presence, aware of all the moving, changing, aware of that protective mechanism, you don't have to then jump to the mind and say, so what are we going to do about it? How are we going to fix it? What's the next strategy? It's to just see how quickly the mind comes in with more strategies, more ideas, more protections, more ways to do and fix. But all of that, it's just to see it and be in awe of the complexity of the mind vehicle, the mind mechanism, and how all of that is protection. None of that has anything to do with the true essential nature, none of it. And really the grace comes in when we recognize, like with every cell of our being, there's an openness that suddenly says, I'm not bound by that story. I'm not that person. I'm not those strategies. I'm not limited. And the felt sense is in the unlimited, infinite, boundless being, in the pure flow of consciousness, in the deep peace and stillness of the essential nature. So there's nothing that we can do to realize this, nothing to do to try harder, nothing to do to make it happen, no instructions or concepts to create. It's really coming to an unguarded adeptness at not moving from those places. You can't even really be willing. We could even say you can't even really be courageous. Not in the way the mind imagines, but courage comes. Tenacity comes, because these are aspects of this flow of freedom, this flow of life is like courageous, tenacious, determined, sincere, earnest, because all of these qualities, all of these aspects are part of the momentum, the trajectory of consciousness to know itself, of consciousness to evolve within itself, to know its divinity, to remember its wholeness. And you are not the person that you imagine yourself to be. You are this consciousness. You are a point, and the wholeness of this consciousness as one that is in an evolutionary trajectory to know its absolute divine wholeness, to know its purity, to know its innocence. And there is a unique individual lived experience of this at the point, but that point is never divided from the whole. And you can only know this truth about what this point is. And for the lived experience, the lived expression, it has to be one with the one experience of consciousness flowing within itself to know itself, to free itself in order to shine as itself. And the shining of consciousness as itself happens when consciousness itself sees through its flowing nature to discover its absolute glorious radiance as the one heart, the one self that is Brahman. It is where the Atman remembers it is Brahman. It's where consciousness remembers its God light, the God essence, the source, right? So we could say that the source of all of the seeming individual mumbo jumbo movement of my life, the source of that is consciousness. But the source of consciousness is divinity, right? So the source of the mumbo jumbo, my life, in truth is divinity. But we move through intelligently as the intelligence of consciousness flowing as life. We move through a seeming process of refinement and humbling out of the protections that bring us to the unquestionable remembrance of the true nature. We could say the first stop is the witnessing presence, the ability to witness the moving, changing parts of the life, the witnessing presence that can witness all that is ebbing and flowing, moving and changing, and recognize first the independence that the witness has from the moving, changing. Aha, number one. Freedom here, spaciousness here, but not quite freedom from the play yet. Freedom from the play and from personhood comes as the witness that's aware of the moving, changing, in the recognition of its independence from the moving, changing. The awareness, the conscious awareness, the witnessing awareness that's aware of the moving, changing, that's spacious and open. It recognizes its independence. Inside its inner intelligence, the consciousness says, I am free of the moving, changing. Therefore, as consciousness, I am not the person where I have been identified. What I am is this peace. I am this peace, this stillness. I am the untouched observer of the person that I have imagined myself to be. Now, consciousness does this in a nanosecond without language. But this is what it is. And as we bring language to it, the language doesn't matter. It's consciousness itself speaking to consciousness to bring the remembrance as consciousness says, oh, I'm not the person where attention identifies with the person. I believe myself to be a person. Where consciousness identifies with a thought, with a body, where consciousness identifies with an object, consciousness believes itself to be that object. It identifies wholeheartedly with the object. Now, as this witnessing presence, watching, the recognition is in consciousness, oh, when I'm witnessing, there's a spaciousness and not an identification with the object. There's a freedom from the object. There's a little spaciousness where I can see the objects, the thoughts, the body sensations, the beliefs, the story, the sense perceptions. I can see it all. But as I am aware of it, I can recognize within the felt sense, consciously aware, I can recognize that I'm not actually that. I'm free of that. I'm independent of all of the moving, changing objects. So a spaciousness comes. And now consciousness, with its sense of spaciousness, says to itself, well, great glory, then what am I? If I am not that person, if I am not the character, if I am not the sense perceptions, the story of the life, and I am not all of those things, then great glory, what am I? What actually am I? Here now, present to my own presence. And as consciousness gazes upon itself, aware of itself, where the consciousness has slowed down and stilled because it is just focusing upon itself, in the stillness, in the silence, there is this ability for consciousness to consciously receive a pure reflection of itself as being consciously aware of itself. Awareness gets a conscious reflection of itself in the stillness of consciousness. And so the awareness that is the witness and the consciousness that has now stilled, that has been dancing as the mind, has now stilled, remembers that it's one, right? Because what happens is the awareness is always here, but the consciousness is dancing as the mind because it's identifying with thoughts and believing itself to be those thoughts, having a little mind party, consciousness, right, in the Maya, right in the thick of it, consciousness, having a little mind party, believing I'm this person, I've got a life, I've got to try and fix it, I've got so much to do, all of these things. The mind party is the me. But when we just come to recognize the awareness of the moment, awareness of the moment, you might even remember coming to awareness, to witness, is a revelation that can be very shocking right in the beginning, where the me is in a meditation class or in a yoga class or in some kind of directive that recognizes, oh, there's something that's watching here. What on earth is that? Oh, it's a part of me, right? Just recognizing that there's awareness, that there's presence here, that it's not all boogaloo in the mind party, right? Wow, amazing revelation, right? Sometimes it takes a little while for the revelation to settle. But in this revelation, consciousness realizes, whoa, I'm not a mind, I'm not a body. I'm aware of that, but here I am as consciousness. And when I'm not identified with the object, I'm free of all of that. So then what great glory am I? And the mind consciousness stills because the focus is upon watching. It stills, it stills. And when the stillness reaches like a critical mass of silence, awareness and consciousness remember the oneness, that it's one conscious awareness, one awareness that now is conscious of itself, remembers itself. Consciousness remembers, I'm not the person. I'm not all the things that I've been identified with. I am the awareness of the objects. And this happens in a nanosecond of revelation. Right? But now consciousness knows its true nature. Consciousness can never be fooled again. But consciousness will be, it will still move within its residual patterns of limitation in order to refine and complete all of these, let's say, karmic flows, has to free all the patterns of limitation that play still as my life. But the consciousness knows I'm not that person. I'm not that character. I'm completely free of all of that. Alleluia. Here is what can be called the first awakening. So the witnessing consciousness, the witnessing awareness recognizes its freedom, being the seer, the observer. And there's such a peace here, such a deep peace and stillness here, a silent presence, a depth of being the being, that the being itself, recognizing itself, is where the consciousness recognizes itself. So here, a little back to basics, right? Remembering. And as the being is being itself, and consciousness is here in the deep, silent peace of remembrance, the remembrance flows as a knowing. It flows within itself. It knows itself, and the knowing flows. The knowing is a flow, and it's an aliveness. It's an aliveness. It's the aliveness of life flowing within itself. Life is consciousness. It's all flowing within itself to know itself. And here, in the knowing of consciousness, the knowing of yourself as the silent being, and the knowing of yourself as this alive flow starts to come alive as a knowing of yourself as life itself. That you start to feel the essential nature of everything as yourself, flowing within yourself, flowing to know yourself, right? And so here, the process of refinement starts to be a little smoother, because this spaciousness for the flow of life to flow is now open and receiving itself. It doesn't mean that resistances don't come up. They still do. But when a resistance comes up, a contraction, a stress comes up, it's able to be received in the flow of life as a refinement, a possibility to meet the stresses, the feelings, and instead of moving as the character that projects and blames and moves in these patterns of protection, there's a natural receptivity that comes, that's willing to meet the feelings, to be still and receive. It still takes a lot. This part of the process of refinement is probably the hardest part, because there's so much resistance in the me to not being a me, not moving within the instincts and within the protections. And so it takes this presence of being and the remembering and the taste of who you are deepening, the freedom, the felt sense of the wholeness, the sense of the love and the openness that you are in truth, the recognition that what you are is everything that has been longed for. And this is what brings the ability to remain, have resolve, receive, and allow the feelings to unwind. you know, an important part of this part of the unfolding is having the companionship of guidance and companionship of Sangha. Because this part that's really hard, if we don't have a companionship that keeps us, let's say, one-pointed, doesn't keep us in the recognition and the remembrance, then we will very likely and possibly just go back to the ways of the me. At some point, you know, things will evolve. It's not that they won't evolve. They will evolve because life will bring in what is needed to evolve. But the grace of guidance and companionship and Sangha is that it keeps us focused and one-pointed and together in this unfolding and remembrance, when the me and the habit, the learned habit, would just very easily just continue to just live itself out in the regular ways. And this is where there can sometimes be a sense of, well, I know what I am, but why do I not abide in it? Why do I still get stressed? Why do I still get angry? Why do I still doubt the truth of who I am? And that's because there's this process of refinement still unfolding, and we have to give ourselves to the intelligence. You can't unfold as a me. You can't know or understand how this works. You can't ever take hold of it as a me. We have to just keep just giving it back, giving it to God, letting go, surrender, devotion, just letting it go, not holding on to anything. Be still and watch. See all the ways of protecting. But even these pointings, they take a lot to really be received, to really land. And that's why coming together and hearing the pointings and being together and hearing the interactions and coming together in your companionships in various ways, it allows the conversation to stay within the realm of consciousness and supporting and guiding and just holding this devotion to truth, this devotion to the glory, to freedom, to love, by reminding each other, by reminding ourselves, right, that we stay. And yes, at some point, the balance tips enough that we can flow more easily in life. There's nothing wrong that in the earlier stages that we just keep getting stuck, we keep forgetting. It's part of the process. It's actually part of the process that brings up the stresses, right? There's an intelligence moving it all. It's all one, right? So where we started today, it is all one. It is all one intelligence. It is all one wholeness. It is all one flow of life. It is all one. Even the flow of life and the flow of consciousness is, let's say, the appearance of creation is a flow of divine intelligence, creative intelligence. It's all coming from the same source, but we want to be aligned with that flow of intelligence so that we're flowing in the flow of attraction, flowing towards God, not away from God. We don't want to be flowing in the flow of the mind and the me and the fixer and the doer and the protection in the sense of separation. We want to be constantly illuminating where there's the habit to make an allegiance with all that separates and divides, so we can keep illuminating that there's nothing of the mind and the world that has anything to do with reality, that we're coming to remember reality. We're coming to remember the light, the glory of what we are, and to live as this light, as this love, and to deepen together into this glory, refine together, so that life is the divine life, that life is about the transmutation, that we come to recognize that life is about transmuting all of the patterns of discordance, all of the protections, so that in that transmutation, we transmute out of any residues of the personal to really know the impersonal. And then we're transmuting anything and anything that comes into our field. And we're resting as the vastness that of love, of divine love, that has the power to truly transmute and bring everything to the remembrance of perfect unconditional love, that we're in a flowing trajectory to come to the remembrance of God, to come to the mother, to Ma, to come to the light, the resonant light, the pure love, and to come to the innocence, the absolute innocence. The discovery of your own innocence truly is the discovery of the innocence. And in a way, this whole unfolding is like this incredible divine forgiveness. It's a forgiveness of yourself. It's a forgiveness of the great misunderstanding. And in that, it's a forgiveness of God, right? There is no forgiveness of others. The forgiveness of yourself is the willingness to be here now. And then we could say the only forgiveness is the forgiveness of God, because the only doer of all is the God light, right? And so really we can hold blame, and we can hold like vengeful thoughts, and we can hold ourselves in separation. But all that is really happening is that we're holding ourselves in protection from ourselves, right? Because everything that we imagine is either wrong with us or has been done wrong to us is all our own work of transmutation in this life, that we're transmuting out of the story of victim perpetrator to the oneness. And we can only transmute the story of opposites, of the me and other, the victim perpetrator. We can only transmute out of this division, this play of separation, by coming to transmute all of our stresses through the nervous system, and allow all of the parts of us that have been suppressed and repressed and pushed away and hidden to be allowed to surface into the light, into the love, into the remembrance of oneness, so that wholeness can be remembered to be our true nature, that we cannot know our wholeness if we are hiding parts of ourselves. And we might say, oh, but they're all personality, they're all, and what we're speaking of is not the mind and the story of it. We're allowing the holding patterns to release. So let's use anger as an example, right? If there in the young life was anger that was repressed because it wasn't safe to be felt, it would have been suppressed and then become a repressed, unconscious, that we don't even remember we have it in there. It becomes a pattern of limitation in consciousness, right? It's a discordant, limited pattern that's hidden. So we move through life, we learn to cope with it, we learn to be a functioning human, and occasionally we get a little aggravated about certain things. Sometimes we just have we just blow up, and it's a little shocking. And then we we come back to our equilibrium of of how we've learned to be. But in this example, there's anger that wasn't acceptable when we were young. And so we come to this sense of spirituality and being able to be very peaceful and meditation, and we're able to be very, in a spiritual mood. We then come to even opening to the true nature. We know the true nature. We know the glory, but then sometimes we suddenly get angry, we suddenly shout, or we suddenly just feel really rageful about something. And we then have the feeling, oh, that's not very spiritual. We actually want to try and hide that. We don't want that to be seen, right? So in this example, if that's in there, no amount of transcending is going to release that. All that's going to release that is that when any inkling of that arises, which it arises as agitation, aggravation, frustration, you drop the jar out of the fridge and it breaks on the floor and you get angry about it. That's the repressed anger trying to surface. I promise you that once it's surfaced and been dealt with, you drop the jar and you don't care, right? It's just an example. But where these places are trying to surface, any of these kind of activities, driving and somebody cuts in front of you, yes, you might have a reaction of like, oh my God, but you get angry, there's the repressed anger, right? We're just using anger here as an example. But if this anger is in there, it has to be allowed, because what happens is that when it comes up, there can then almost be a like, oh, push that away again. Don't behave like that. And we become adept at keeping a spiritual mood in place and maybe feeling aggravated, but saying, no, I'm not aggravated. And that's passive aggressive, right? No, I'm totally fine, sweetie. I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine. Right? No, everything's good here. Everything's good. But you can feel like something's, there's an elephant in the room that's not being expressed. These are all the places that we want to allow it within our own functioning. We have to allow it within our own functioning. Just that we can be honest with ourselves, that we could say, just within our own functioning, wow, there's something here. There's some aggravation here. There's some anger here. Or we might notice, wow, I just put on a face there. I just put on a total facade there. But just within your own functioning, you just start to notice that wasn't honest. I didn't feel comfortable to express that I was aggravated, right? We just start to notice, wow, I just screamed at that driver. Wow, a family member is speaking in a certain way to me, and I just shouted. I just shouted back, right? The thing is, we have to come first to allow ourselves to be honest within our own functioning, right? Just to notice. You don't have to immediately be able to say, well, I'm feeling angry right now, whatever, right? Because it's scary. It's scary because as a child, there was a learning it wasn't safe. It got pushed down and suppressed, and then deeper, 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 so that you don't even know it's there. And it's kind of scary. You don't want that to be there. But that part of you that you don't want to be there, that is part of your wholeness. You need that part to know your wholeness. Your wholeness depends on that part, right? Just like your wholeness depends upon every being that you want to hate or hold blame with, your wholeness depends on your oneness with every single one of those beings. Your wholeness depends on your oneness with everything that you want to push away. Because how can wholeness be whole if there's anything being held in separation and protection, right? So in this example that we're speaking of with anger, you just start to notice kindly as the awareness within your own functioning. Wow, I'm aggravated. There must be some anger here. Or you notice, wow, I just reacted and blew up. There's anger there. Don't make the anger wrong. And I would also say, within our companionship, if someone shows anger, don't make their anger wrong. Have the courage to hold a companion that expresses anger in absolute love. Don't be a character that tries to invite your friends, family, loved ones to suppress anger. Be able to just open within the whole field that if we don't bring anger to holiness, right? If we don't bring anger and all of our suppressed feelings to holiness, they will stay hidden and the imbalance of separation will remain as long as all of these places don't come forward. So it takes what it takes to be able to open to this that we're speaking of. It doesn't happen in one movement. It doesn't happen just in one day. It doesn't happen in one seeing. It's a refinement, and it takes a depth of being and awareness and love and presence that can hold these places so that we don't react back, that we don't criticize, we don't bring the critic and the judge forward that says, don't be angry, don't be angry, don't show your anger. That we open, that we can show anger, that we can express, I'm feeling frustrated right now. I'm noticing some aggravation arising, and I feel like I need to sit with it. I don't want to project it. Or, wow, I just realized I was angry and I just projected my anger there. That in whichever way that awareness suddenly shines upon it, that we notice that there's something here. And now, where we're using anger as an example, we can also bring this. Of course, there's many flavors of anger: rage and fury, the passive aggressive, the aggravation, the frustration, absolute kind of furious, wild, whatever, vengeance. All of these things are expressions of anger. Anger's a protection, right? What's underneath the anger? Yeah, what's underneath the anger? Likely some sadness, some grief, some hurt, some confusion, right? All of these things are hiding in there. And so we bring, where we're using anger as an example, we also recognize that any kind of emotional outburst or any feelings or sensations, feeling sad, feeling hurt, feeling grief, feeling stress, feeling anxiety, feeling fear. It doesn't matter what we fill in the blank, but we learned when we were young, unless we had the most incredibly conscious parents and guardians that allowed us to feel all of our feelings and just be upset, be whatever we were. And mostly we didn't. Not because they are bad, but because it's part of the play and because they didn't have those possibilities, right? So it's all one. And this is how parents just pass on their holdings to their children. But what happens is that we don't go into the story of that. We don't go into any stories of guilt or shame or blame around that, because that's just another protection. We recognize that here now in this life, we have the incredible possibility of transmuting all of this through our nervous system, coming to the freedom and the glory of God. And in this, we also free our families, our ancestors. We free the patterns of limitation that have played out. We don't need to go into any kind of stories about all of that. It happens within our own functioning. When we take complete responsibility and we pull in all projections, and we include in that the projections where we blame ourselves, we guilt ourselves and shame ourselves. We pull all of those protections that acts as projections in, and we take complete responsibility that this life isn't a personal life that needs to be fixed. This life is a possibility for transmuting everything into love. So let us be the love that is the powerhouse where transmutation can take place. How we discover the love that we are is in the being that we are, is in the unmoving, unchanging. We discover the unmoving, unchanging being is the opening to know the glory of love, to know the glory of God, to know the innocence. And that innocence belongs to all. The innocence belongs to our parents and guardians and their parents and guardians and ad infinitum within the play of creation and within the dance of humanity. That we have this possibility in this life to take complete responsibility and be the consciousness that is in the process of evolution, right? That there is a glorious possibility, and that our relationships are the fertile ground for stimulating, catalyzing, and bringing forward all of the feelings that have been hidden away. We don't need to make a project of it. We don't have to do anything within the mental or psychological realm, because there's an intelligence of consciousness that's moving it all, and it's called life. We just live life here now, present, as the aware being that is watching. And as we receive and transmute, we come to know ourselves as life, as love, as the one consciousness. We come to know the oneness through being the flow of life, transmuting. We come to remember the unity of all. We come to discover the richness and the abundance of being the flow of life, where we can meet everything, welcome everything in love, and we grow in the knowing of the love that we are, and the sense of personal heart opens to the infinite heart, which is unprotected, and we naturally come to remember the true nature, right? We naturally open using the simple intelligence of consciousness and all that this creative appearance is, to open to the divinity. That it's a natural process. And really the pointings here are really like a speaking of the intelligence of consciousness, speaking the intelligence, in order that the intelligence that you are, the consciousness that you are in truth, recognizes the mechanical functioning, the mechanistic functioning of what you are, and remembers what this is, so that there can be a deeper allowing of your life. Let's say your sense of the individual life can flow at the point without leaving the oneness, and recognizing that your experience is not a unique experience or a divided experience, that your experience is the one flow of life. Nothing about you is unique and in a divided way. There are laws of nature that make up the point, but the point flowing in the unique laws of nature is never divided from the whole field, never divided from the whole field. So it's all one. So this is why blaming and projecting has no benefit but protection, right? It's a way of protection. And if we come to a responsibility for all of our own functioning, receiving life, we take responsibility for the reflections of life. There's nothing in the life that we're not within the intelligence creating as an appearance to bring up all of the feelings. Everything is about bringing up the feelings so that we can actually feel them. And the grace of companionship, guidance, and Sangha is that we can be held and supported in this unfolding, where there's an understanding, let's say, that the understanding is the intelligence of consciousness, that we're moving as one, that we're not dividing away, we're not pulling ourselves away, that the relationships are the fuel for our freedom, however hard they are, whatever we have to meet in it, and that we know that if what we have to meet feels harder than we can manage, that we have guidance and companionship so that we can hold each other in this, so that we can be the love, be the light, the one love, the one light, that there's no division, that there's no better love over there, there's no different love over there, right? That you are the love and everything is conspiring for you to be the love. And until you are the love, you will divide love and imagine that love is a currency to be bargained with. You will imagine that love can be better with one person than with another person. But that's because the love that you are has not been discovered yet. When you know the love that you are, love is just love. And anywhere that you feel a division or a resistance is just an opportunity to know love in that place, right? It doesn't mean that the play of life on the surface plays out always in happy endings and stories that have fairy tale happenings in them, right? The fairy tale is in your heart. The happy ending is in your heart. The resolution is in your heart. The play will play out whatever it needs to play out. When the resolution comes in the heart, maybe the story will change on the surface, and maybe it won't. It doesn't matter, because the knowing of the oneness in God, one in the heart, one in love, is where the resolution is. And it's to free yourself from everything in your own heart and use the grace of guidance and companionship and Sangha to support this. And of course, the work will happen outside with your family and friends and jobs and companions, because all of that is a reflection of your consciousness and an opportunity to receive yourself wherever you're bothered. Wherever you're bothered, it's an opportunity to bring forward those feelings within your own functioning, right? And where the grace of all of this is in the recognition of that which is never moving and changing. In the being, the light. In the light, in the being, the felt sense of being the being is where the transmutation takes place. In the light and the knowing of yourself, everything can be received. You can bear it all. You can receive it all. Because you are the love. You are the presence that can receive it all. There is a part of the process where we're coming to remember this deeply enough. We can need to be supported and held. as we come to remember and be able to hold ourselves in this, that we actually need to be supported. And part of that is a surrender of a protection. A certain kind of independence can be a protection, right? So a part of the unfolding is letting go of the protection of feeling like you have to do it alone, and being able to share it, be revealed, be supported, be held. And then it comes around again that you can hold yourself, and then you can hold others, right? But there's a natural flow that we're always being asked to take a look at. Where are you holding? Is there hiding there? Is there protection there? Nothing's ever being forced. It's a natural unfolding within our functioning. And the grace is that the glory is here, untouched, undiminished. The perfect love is always here. And in a way, we have to just turn to the perfect love. We stop trying to fix and change. We stop protecting, and we say yes. We say yes to the glory. We say yes to the correction out of the misunderstanding. We say yes to the truth. Where we can feel the truth, we say yes to the truth. We say yes to love. We say yes to God. We don't have to say no to anything, because the saying yes to truth is an immediate allegiance with truth. And in a way, it's a complete dissolution of fear. It's where the transmutation happens, is where we're saying yes to the glory, yes to the glory. And then we can receive life and allow whatever arises in life just to surface. And this is where what comes to happen is that we allow the feelings to come up that feel like the suppressed and repressed anger and sadness and grief and fear. We don't label it. We don't get involved in the story. We do let the voice speak its wisdom so that nothing is suppressed. We allow the expression to come forward. It's not about telling the story and getting lost in the story, but we allow the expression to come forward, to allow nothing to be suppressed, a total allowance, a total welcoming. And as true transmutation takes place, what comes to be realized is that there's nothing left, that there was nothing really ever happened, that it was only ever a thought, that the whole of the life has just been a fantasy in the mind. All of the relationships, all of the happenings, it's all been a fantasy. It's all just been in the mind. None of it's really ever happened. But we can only come to this knowing by moving through our own refinement process out of all of these holding patterns of limitation. And so the knowing of this isn't a conceptual, expressive, nothing ever happened. And you can tell when a being expresses nothing ever happened. You can actually hear in the resonance, you can feel in the resonance that that's not true, that they do not know that it's conceptual. Because in that, in that is the resonance of the repression. The resonance of the repression is in there. You can hear it. You can hear it when it's expressed. Hear it as a resonance when it's expressed. You can tell when it's true because there's love here. There's love. There's love. And we can recognize the resonance of love. We can recognize where there's no protection. We can recognize it. So nothing needs to be proven. There's no point. Who would prove anything, right? We recognize love. We recognize truth because it's the true nature and it's the pull of attraction. And we can recognize where there is protection. We recognize the protection. We recognize something doesn't feel right here, right? But where something doesn't feel right, we meet those feelings within us because it's an opportunity to feel something that you don't feel right about within yourself. Everything is a reflection. Everything is a reflection, right? So if something doesn't feel completely clear, find that within you. Find that within you, right? Find the resolution. Sometimes it's just the recognition, oh, I don't have to engage with that. Because sometimes within our functioning, we can imagine that we have to keep playing out unhealthy dynamics. But if the unhealthy dynamics that we're creating, it's a little tricky here to express this, but if the unhealthy dynamics are in the play with a being that isn't doing their work, then the work isn't maybe happening in complete balance. You can only do the work where you are. What can happen, particularly sometimes, obviously, within couples or within family dynamics, is that you want there to be a balance. You want there to be a matching. And it doesn't work like that. That you can only do your work. When you do your work, things will probably start to shift, but you might still feel like you're in a relationship with one that is still blaming and projecting and these kind of things. This is the place where we have to recognize that you have to find the resolve within yourself. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay or leave the relationship. That will be a natural happening. You're not choosing that. But you have to find the resolve within yourself, not keep projecting that you're doing it together. Even if you're married, it doesn't matter. It's still a completely unique process. You can't actually even let the fact that you're married be a barrier to your own unfolding, to be honest, because it will be if you use it as a protection, because there can be a using. It doesn't matter whether you have a marriage in certificate or a long-term relationship. And this would be true with family dynamics, that we can use the dynamic as a way of hiding. Oh, well, that's my mom, you know, I make excuses for that. It's like, if we're hiding something, we have to keep transmuting. We have to keep transmuting. But we also have to recognize that if you are stuck within a dynamic where you're just repeating the same thing, you have to stop. At some point, you have to say no to your own behavior, that you can be repeating a dynamic to keep the other person safe, right? If you're repeating a dynamic to keep the other person safe, what you're really doing is keeping yourself safe, right? Always, it's always about you. If you're keeping yourself safe by not looking at something, not quite wanting to turn up the apple cart there, not quite wanting to say that, not quite wanting to. Of course, in divine timing, it will happen, but just illuminating here that we can use kind of those kind of dynamics as a hiding place. And it's not about, oh, then do I need to leave the relationship, or do I need to? Actually, it's not about that at all. It's about doing your true full work within the relationship, actually receiving the grace of even where you're hiding within the relationship, even where you don't want to have that honest conversation, right? It's to meet within yourself. Well, why do I not want to have that honest conversation? Why do I not want to say that? Why have I been married to this person for all these years and I can't say that? What's that about? Right? These are the places that we want to look at. Or a family dynamic. I'm the child of that mother or father. Why would I not say that honestly? What am I protecting here? Right? These are the places that we just have to find it within ourselves. And again, it cannot be about protection. Sorry, it cannot be about projection or making the other one wrong. It's about what is going on within your functioning and having the courage just to be within your own functioning about what is really happening here, because these are the places of grace. These are the places of grace. But there can also be a recognition of, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I can just actually not act out that same dynamic. I cannot give my companion the grace of arguing back. I can just say, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. Enough, stop. Because you start to recognize that you have ways of relating, that you're just playing ego ping pong, and that you just see it. No, I'm not going to do that anymore. I won't be that character for you anymore. I won't play this role for you anymore. Because then you're asking your companion to look at their own stuff, right? So, of course, there's so many intricacies within this, but relational dynamics are the ground for the incredible transmutation to take place when we don't project and we recognize whatever's happening here is an offering of grace. What is there to look at here? Where am I keeping myself safe? Can we come to the true safety and recognize that we're not here to live out this life in a protective dynamic? We're here to come to a complete freedom in this life, to drop the costume and to be the love, to open into God, the glory, right? So there's nothing of the world that is of any use to us in this unfolding. Nothing of the world. There's nothing of the mind that is of any use to us in this unfolding. It is to know yourself, rest here being yourself, and the saying yes. Yes to love, yes to freedom, yes to God, yes to Ma, yes to the glory. Here is where the transmutation can take place. So here is the transcendent field. It is the transcendent field, but we're not transcending to bypass anything. We're opening to recognize you are the transcendent field. And as the transcendent field, you don't need to bypass anything. You don't need to hide, because as the transcendent field, you're not touched by anything. You're not disturbed by anything. And if there is anything that's disturbed, bring it home. Bring it home to love, right? If there's anything in your functioning that's disturbed, then bring it home. It is just longing for love. Bring all of your functioning, all of your threads, all the fibers of yourself home to the remembrance of wholeness, right? And then the naturalness of being yourself, the naturalness of the rest of the lived human experience is living as the light, as love, as the innocence. And this is the living divinity, right? This is living in God. This is awake in God, one in the heart of God.